Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Soumya, and I have a pleasure of hosting this very special masterclass where our speaker, Mr. Haricharan, will walk you through this session. And we have planned this special session to be an engaging and fun. So keep sending in your comments or suggestions, or if you have any questions that you have, so we will answer them for sure at the end of the session. Or if you want to talk in between also, you can post your questions. So if Haricharan is okay, then we can pick up the questions in between also. And yes, so I'm handing over the session to Mr. Haricharan from here.
Hey, thank you, Soumya. Really appreciate it. Hey, everyone. Very good evening, good afternoon, good morning from whichever part of the world you're joining us from. Thank you so much for taking the time off. I'm going to make sure that the next 45 minutes of your time are spent well. I'll keep you engaged as much as possible, telling you a lot of interesting stuff, including stories. I'll be more interested in a few of your responses, which we will post as poll questions in a couple of minutes from now. There'll be a few poll questions that I want to talk to you about. And I'd like to know your opinion, and then we'll take it from there. Right. So this topic of scaling DevOps and safe is not just one particular topic that I want to talk about, because we've been doing these Scaled Agile masterclasses for quite some time now. So we've done multiple series of them. And this is one of the topics that we've come up in the month of November. Right. So the concept of DevOps in general itself is slightly not touched upon very frequently in the public market, because DevOps is mostly considered as tooling, and mostly it's all about CI/CD and pipeline and all the dirty stuff that we talk about usually. But the reality is DevOps is a very, very integral part of everyday existence. It's a very integral part of software delivery. Now, with that understanding, right, let's jump very quickly to a very interesting slide that I want to talk about, right? I'm sure you must know about these very famous brands that we see on the screen. Do you know what these 4 brands in common? If you know what they have in common, please drop a message in the chat box. Merchandise, excellent. Okay, Fahim says merchandise. Mark says right. Mark, Hernissa, and Dostan. Beautiful, right? Rodriguez, I'm not sure what, right? Beautiful. Yes, exactly. These brands no longer exist. They're all gone, right? They don't exist in the world anymore, right? These iconic brands all failed to adapt quickly enough. And why? Because the world around them was changing. They were either not fast enough to change, or they were not innovative enough to adapt to the change that was around them, right? And their downfall is often quoted as a story for most organizations to keep up pace. Digital disruption is just right around the corner. Your industry can get, completely eviscerated and evaporated overnight by, all these artificial intelligence tools that we have today in the market. So how can you avoid the same fate? The answer is to make business agility your superpower that we talk about, right? Super power, when I say superpower, it really is a superpower. Being able to change your business strategy, being able to respond to market change quickly, elegantly, right, without disrupting a lot of your existing workflows is really business agility in its true sense. Now, with that, let's go a little bit deeper. The creator of Scaled Agile, Dean Leffingwell, he says, to thrive in the digital age, you need business agility. And he says this new way of working requires a new mindset, values, principles, and practices. And he also used a very interesting quote. So he often says that today, every business is a software business. Like any business that you take in the world today is essentially at its core, you will find some part of software powering it. Right? And when you look at every business being a software business kind of a mindset, you would start noticing that a lot of the agility that we often attribute to these businesses mostly is focused only on the development team, only on the engineering team, And Dean Leffingwell says that should not be the case. We should start focusing on the entire organization. He says business agility is not any one department's focus. Right? In a disruptive world, only the most adaptable organizations will thrive. Right? And this is a fact that I've seen happen in front of my eyes in the last 4-5 years in many organizations that haven't been able to adapt themselves have almost perished, and especially during the corona crisis and stuff that we've seen. Many organizations that have not been nimble enough to change have basically evaporated from the face of the earth. Now, what is this DevOps, right? A lot of people tend to talk about DevOps as a very interesting battle. It is indeed an interesting battle per se, right? On the left, you have our product managers and your delivery managers and your engineers whose main job is to deliver features to customers. They're very focused on feature delivery one after the other. On the right hand side, you have our friends from IT, DevOps, right? Their job is to keep things stable, right? And very soon it becomes a concept of dev versus ops. It's no longer DevOps. It's more about development versus ops, right? Why? Because the focus of product engineering, right, development, is all about going faster. Business needs these features. Let's go build, develop. The focus of ops is more on let's go slower. We need more stability, right? And whatever builds you're releasing in production, they're probably breaking my builds, right? So it's not great. So these dev and ops are in constant conflict between how do we manage both of this. But the reality is, it's not just dev and ops we're talking about. We're talking about a lot of moving parts. We're talking about operations, we're talking about development, we're talking about security, we're talking about business, architecture, compliance. We tend to think as dev and ops as just two simple, spheres of influence. It's not. It's the entire organization that needs to come together, right? And all of it together has to work for speed and stability. Now, to quote the Scaled Agile definition of DevOps, DevOps is basically a mindset, culture, and a set of technical practices that support the integration, automation, and collaboration needed to effectively develop and operate a solution. This is the fundamental ethos of DevOps, right? Now, here's a poll question that I want you to ask. I think Soumya will enable it for us.
Yeah.
Right. What are some common issues that you are facing in DevOps, or are you facing in your DevOps implementation, right? So you have about, I think, 60 seconds. So you should see a prompt on your screen. Please do answer that question.
Okay, so nobody wants to answer this question? I think everyone is able to see the poll question.
You should see a poll question on your screen. Yeah, one person has answered it.
Yeah. Okay, we are receiving the answers in the chat also. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can comment your answers in the chat or chat only if you're not able to, type in.
Answer.
Yeah.
Right. So let's move forward with this, right? So we're talking about, so what are some very common problems with DevOps that we are seeing, right? So we are looking at lack of test, build, and deployment automation. We're also looking at production defects are not caught up due to mismatched environments, right? So your production and your pre-prod are not in sync. Your pre-prod and your UAT is not in sync, right? You always deploy in large batches, basically leading to a lot of errors or outages. There's also you're not communicating your end user problems very effectively. There's a lot of lack of trust between development and operations. And more importantly, you have a lot of these dependency tracking across multiple components. And when the changes are being merged and they're being promoted across multiple environments, they start cracking or falling through the cracks. Now, this is not the end of it. There's a lot more, right? So we have this whole teams are bypassing compliance rules, right? They take shortcut due to pressure. They use a long library just because it helps them get the job done. There's no tooling per se. There's no one tool or product or solution that offers you observability, any monitoring. How do I track all these KPIs? How do I make sure that utilization is well within limits, right? I cannot monitor performance. My tool chain itself is kind of like sprawled across the entire ecosystem, right? I have so many different teams using different tools. There is no good test data, right? I have very poor quality of data sets. I see a lot of gaps in between how we're testing our applications and our infrastructure. All of these are some common problems that we are seeing constantly with DevOps, and I'm seeing this as part of my consulting initiatives as well. I see this as a very common problem. A lot of people observing this. Now, let's look at this as a scenario, right? So this is a scenario that was presented by Damon Edwards at a DevOps conference in Netherlands. I thought it was a very good slide to present. So I'm just taking his slide over here, right? So you see this, I need X, meaning you need something. You have your own backlog, you have your own information, you have your own tools, you have your own priorities, which is great. You need something. Now, what you need is being provided by someone else who does that. So you have now team A and team B. Team A needs something, team B does something. And what you need to be done is done by team B, right? But now there is a big wall between them, right? So what happens? Now I need to communicate. So A will request for something from team B. Great, fantastic. But there is a small mismatch here. What is the mismatch here? You see, there is some gap. There is a knowledge gap between both the teams. There is a skills gap between both the teams. There is an access gap between both the teams. Like they don't see the same things. They use different resources. They use different tooling. All of it is exacerbated by the fact that they all operate in different contexts. Team B does something else for some other customer. Team A does something else for some other customer. They use different processes. They use different tooling. They have different capacity. So what you want may not be done by the other team. What the other team wants may not be taken up by you. Right? So with this confusion, right? How do you actually get things done? This is all siloing, right? This is a very typical use case in most of modern day organizations. Then, of course, I want to make up the point that the wall of confusion is often built on bricks of misunderstanding. We're often misunderstanding things that are lining up in front of us, mainly because we don't see what the other person sees as is. And plus, we have built our own silos on top of one another. Right? So now I had a poll question asking for what is DORA. So I think we already answered it partially there. My question is, if anybody wants to take a stab at it in the chat window, do you want to talk about what is DORA very quickly? Anybody wants to take a stab in the chat window?
Somebody answered while we presented the poll. So you can take the same here in the chat.
Yeah. Anybody wants to talk about what is DORA?
Yes, Vikram.
You can type it in the chat window. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else who wants to attempt it also can type it in the chat window, please. Okay, so what is DORA, right? So if you had asked me, it's a nice little cartoon character, right? Dora the Explorer, yes?
Right.
So Dora has a lot of interpretations, right? You have, of course, Dora the Explorer. You have the Digital Operational Resilience Act. You have the DHCP Dora process. You have Dora used for a lot designated outdoor area refreshment. All of this part of Dora. But the Dora that we are talking about is slightly more nuanced. We are talking about a very specific DevOps research and assessment team, right? Now, most of you must have read the book on the left called Accelerate, written by Jess Humble and Gene Kim, right? And they talk a lot about DORA metrics, right? So what is this DORA, right? DORA is purely based on 4 major categories, which is how many times we deploy, basically how good we deliver, and what is the quality of our delivery. So how many times we deploy, what's the time it takes for each delivery, What's the time to restore service if something goes down? And what is the rate at which, our changes that we're deploying in the market are failing, right? Change failure rate. And as you can see, Google has come up with their own definitions of what does an elite team look like, what does a high performing team look like, what does a medium performing team look like, and what does a low performing team look like. A low performing team probably deploys once a month or probably once every 6 months, right? There's a lead time for any change that you need. Probably anybody has to wait for anywhere between 1 month to 6 months, right? And every time there is a change failure rate, 40 to 60% of your changes deployed fail in production. You have to roll back and you have to make something again, right? Now, DORA metrics are not to be seen as an isolated bunch of metrics, right? Why I'm saying this? Because DORA metrics, I'll come back to the slide in a minute. DORA metrics are often part of what we call as your capabilities. What is your technical capability? What is your process capability? What's your cultural capability, right? All of these together will directly affect your software delivery and operational performance. So technical capabilities, I'm sure you're all aware of, like, there's a lot of technical capabilities that we can talk about: cloud infra, shifting left on security, trunk-based development stuff. Process-wise, we can talk about working in smaller batches, streamline changes, right? Visibility of work in the value stream. And I'm also talking about cultural changes, which is a very generative kind of environment. We're going to talk about generative environment in some time, organization sometime. Transformation leadership. All of this we are doing for what purpose or what to end? For commercial outcomes. We're doing it for purely, we are doing it for some sort of profitability, some sort of metric that drives our KPIs and our OKRs inside the company. Now, in the novel, the Phoenix Project, right? Eric says to the grasshopper, if you've not read the book, it's a very good book to read. Please do read the Phoenix Project book. Eric says to grasshopper that in order for you to keep up with customer demand, you need to create a deployment pipeline. You need to get everything in version control. You need to automate the entire environment creation process. You need a deployment pipeline where you can create, test, and production environments and then deploy code into them entirely on demand. This is literally the definition of a deployment pipeline that I see, and this coming in a technical novel. Okay. Now, so we talked about DORA assessments. We talked about the Phoenix Project briefly. We also talked about getting to DORA is why it's not easy, because it involves all your capabilities, your technical capability, your process capability, and your cultural capabilities. But that's not all, right? Let's talk about culture a little bit. So the Western topology basically says that there are 3 categories of cultures, right? So you have the pathological power-oriented cultures, you have the bureaucratic cultures, and then you have the generative or performance-oriented cultures. And we find that the maximum efficiency, the maximum benefits that we get are from organizations on the right-hand side of this extreme, not the left one. The left ones are extremely, closed, non-cooperative cultures, which often, where often failure is not tolerated under any circumstances, right? Now, what I've seen as part of my personal exploration is that almost all modern day transformations are basically a journey from a pathological kind of an organization culture to a more generative, performance-oriented organization culture. So when you say, what do you mean by generative culture? We're looking at high cooperation between teams. We're talking about messengers being trained how to communicate between other messengers, right? You share your risks. You encourage bridging between other teams. You encourage sharing of knowledge. When you fail, you basically make sure that there is a root cause analysis. You do an analysis of why we failed, what happened there. And more importantly, we are constantly innovating. Right? So these are some parts or some aspects of a culture that if you think you want to bring about good DevOps or you want to scale your DevOps, you have to make sure that your culture is supportive of that kind of behavior. And these are the behaviors that your culture needs to exhibit. Right? Now, with that understanding, let's go a little bit further, right? So psychological safety is one of the key elements in a generative culture. Now, I will not go into too much of detail into exactly, all this psychological culture details, but I want to talk about only these 4 high-level points, right? Obviously, if you have low psychological safety, it's basically people will not pick up new things. So which means it's a barrier to your transformation. Point number one. Point number two, you want to basically break down the silos that we have been building. Remember that wall of confusion that we talked about earlier? We want to break it down. We want to make sure that, yes, risk is there, we accept that risk. And very, very important that we can grow only when we start looking at other perspectives as well. Right? Now, with this understanding, I also want to talk about what is the effect of psychological safety. Without going too deep, basically, Google's work report calls out psychological safety as a very key indicator of team performance. And many research McKinsey's and KPMG's of the world and Accentures of the world have done the same thing. And they found out that it basically, a psychologically safe environment leads to much lesser stress among people, higher productivity, more engagement, less burnout, and higher energy in general. Right? So as you can see, culture has a very, 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 very important role in scaling DevOps. Or in basically, if you want to get DevOps across your entire organization, you need to have a very good culture in general. Now, with that understanding, I want to go a little bit more deeper. What drives this, right? So if you were to ever plot, psychological safety of a team and what drives them to that extent, right? On a scale of low, high, and low, high, you see that teams which have high psychological safety and high motivational drivers, these teams will always assume accountability, right? They will always take ownership of things. There is intrinsic achievement motivation, like they are intrinsically motivated to achieve things on their own. They don't need somebody to prod them and tell them, hey, you need to get to this point. There's also a culture of constructive controversy, meaning that we want to make sure that we are fireproofing things. We are proof testing a lot of these things. And there's a positive error orientation, meaning that any error could have happened. Sure, we understand, but we want to move towards the direction of correcting that error and making sure that that mistake doesn't happen again. Now, all of this was all about culture. We're talking a lot about culture, but what about other aspects, right? Now, this is something that I wanted to talk about at detail. So this is presentation by David Keane at a DevOps conference in Amsterdam, right? So David Keane basically works at HSBC. And you can see, right, this is like a very high level overview of what the HSBC DevOps journey looks like. Right? And this is not a slide by me, this is a slide by David Keane. I'm just showing you the data of what HSBC has done, right? So HSBC's journey has not been for the last 1 year or 2 years. They have been at it for over 10 years now, right? So their journey starts in 2014, where they had one application and 100 people working underneath it, right? And their final plan in 2027, when their application ends, when their program ends, is that they will have 8,500 applications and over 50,000 people under this whole transformation program. And as part of this entire bank-wide transformation program, what they found out is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Doesn't matter how well you plan, doesn't matter what kind of beautiful roadmaps you put in. If you don't have a great culture to support your roadmap, it's going to go for a toss. They also found out that communication is extremely key need for succeeding. And they use their business to advocate for more DevOps. They use their business to show that, we've achieved so much of success with DevOps and we want to do more with it, right? And as you can see, right, the number of releases and the number of incidents is basically where they're targeting, where it will come by somewhere around January of 2025. They are expecting that the number of releases will exceed the number of incidents that they are making. Right? Now, with this is one use case of many use cases that we have seen of DevOps at HSBC. I also want to talk about another use case, but before that, let's talk about what Steve Van Wyk says. Right? He's HSBC Group CIO. So he says that we have seen huge success since adopting DevSecOps. It's enabling our engineers to do what they do best, creating leading-edge solutions at pace to deliver value to our customers faster. And as we mature, we'll continue to enhance our capabilities so we can remain competitive in the fast-changing digital environment. Right? And you can see this is basically part of HSBC's core culture. Now, I want to talk about one more use case about DevOps at American Airlines. As you know, right, American Airlines is not a small company. It serves over 500,000 customers every single day, right? They have over 6,800 flights flying in flying in and flying out every day. They serve over 365 destinations, and they have a staff of over 100,000 people on board, right? So during the whole pandemic period, right, they had only one goal: keep the company afloat. That's all they cared about. If we could somehow keep the company afloat, it will be great. That's what they kept thinking. And as part of this whole scaling process, what they found out was they realized they need to restructure around product. So they adopted a DevOps mindset, right? And the first thing that they did was they started training everybody. And if you could notice, right, they started thinking big, starting small, and learning fast, right? So entire company bought in, right? They found success in the least expected places. They celebrated all their wins. They basically made it a very safe place to learn new things. And more importantly, product owners became next generation leaders. And more importantly, what I found the best part was their culture attributes, right? Their culture attributes were more focused towards being passionate, being selfless, and being accountable, right? And we are talking about DevOps, right? So we talked about DevOps at a financial firm. We are talking about DevOps at an airline company. So you can see they are real examples of how they've operated DevOps at scale. They've managed to pull it off, right? Now, high performing IT organizations, they deploy 30 times more frequently than lesser performing IT operations. They have 200 times shorter lead times, 60 times fewer failures, and they recover 168 times faster. And all of this is pretty well documented. There are many surveys and handbooks that come out every year. You can find that this is going to be the norm going forward. People are expecting DevOps to become more and more efficient as we go along. Right? Now, what is the connection between Scaled Agile and the CDP and continuous delivery pipeline, right? So in Scaled Agile, we have for DevOps, we have a concept called as release on demand, continuous exploration, continuous integration, and continuous deployment. It's a cycle. So it starts with the customer. We start exploring with the customer, then we do continuous integration, we do deployment, and finally we do release on demand. And as you can see, every single phase of this journey with the customer is split into 4 more phases, right? Hypothesis, collaborate and research, architect, synthesis, and so on and so forth. Now, this CDP or continuous delivery pipeline that we talk about in Scaled Agile is a very fundamental part of how we operate in Scaled Agile. Now, what we have done is, or we as a Scaled Agile team has done is, we've added one small variation to this, which is how do you execute all of this? How do you pull this all together? Like, how do you make sure that exploration, integration, deployment, release on demand, how does all of this work together? And for that, we basically have put in DevOps in place. DevOps basically enables the continuous delivery pipeline. It is the engine that keeps the CDP running. And DevOps is part of Agile product delivery in Scaled Agile. So we learn about DevOps when we learn about the module called Agile product delivery. And as you can see, they have a very clear structure of how DevOps is helping, right? So if you notice here, you can see DevOps basically is talking about deployment pipeline, we're talking about configuration management, talking about version control, continuous security, continuous quality, value stream management. At the center of all of this is something very interesting, are the letters CALMR. I'm sure most of you are quite familiar with what is CALMR, also called as Karma. And it's basically an acronym that is there in the DevOps world, basically for a culture. So C stands for culture, A stands for automation, L for lean flow, M for measurement, and R for recovery. Right? So the Karma culture is all about establishing a culture of shared responsibility for development, deployment, and operations. Automation, automate the continuous delivery pipeline. Lean flow, keep the batch size small, limit your WIP, and provide extreme visibility. M is for measurement, measure the flow through pipeline, implement full stack telemetry. And R is for recovery, architect and enable low risk releases, establish fast recovery, fast reversion, and fast fix forward. And as you can see, the calmer approach to DevOps is basically fundamental in Scaled Agile, right? We use DevOps at our very core to run our products and services, right? Now, what are some takeaways? Like, what are some important takeaways that I want you to keep in mind when you're implementing DevOps in your organization, right? So don't lose sight of enterprise realities in your DevOps journey. Why? Because you have a lot of bodies or lot of moving parts in your own organization. You have IT service management, you have governance and risk management, you have sourcing, you have EUC, you have GDPR, right? So don't let go of all these things that are running in your organization. DevOps needs to cover all of this. Point number 2, this is a learning curve for everybody. So make sure that you're not like overly like pushing everything on top of your colleagues' head, let's just do this, do this, do this. No, pay attention to what is their learning anxiety and find out how much are they really cognitively overloaded before we move forward. Make sure that you are keeping pace with your business. There's no point in you running faster than your business if your business cannot keep up with you, right? Make sure that you're calling out all technical risk and all of your risk management as an explicit priority. There should not be any doubt about this, right? And I like this quote a lot, right? With uncontrolled autonomy comes unmanageable complexity. So don't think that governance is not required. Leverage the governance meetings, leverage the Scaled Agile cadences as much as possible to make sure that we are controlling this whole thing. And my favorite part is language is leadership. Change the language, right? Let's make sure that we use language which is conducive of building a generative culture. Change the language and you will change the culture. And not every team can adopt DevOps in the same way at the same pace and have the same goal. So don't think that some other organization is doing DevOps transformation and they got it done in 5 months. Why can't we do it in 1 month? You will never be able to do it in 1 month. Your own organization stakes are different, right? Now, DevOps is a journey for your customers as well. So I want you to keep in mind that customers also do not know what is DevOps sometimes. They are seeing things for the first time. For them, a lot of this is very, very new, right? So keep your customers in mind when you start your DevOps journey, because end of the day, they are the ones who are going to be benefiting from the effective DevOps in the ground. The last one is write your contracts with delivery and your way of working in mind. Like if you have a very if you cannot really innovate, or if you have a cycle of 6 months, once in 6 months is what is delivery is, make sure your contracts reflect that. There's no point in telling the customer that you're going to give a 2-week delivery, and then you find out that it's probably going to be 6 months that you're going to be doing delivery every 6 months. It doesn't make sense at all. Right? So please keep that in mind. Make sure that you're talking to your customers about what kind of DevOps journey you're in. You're also talking to customers about what kind of contracts you're writing with them. Right? Now, why should you adopt for Scaled Agile? Why are we talking about this? Why Scaled Agile, right? In terms of popularity of Scaled Agile is the most popular framework. It has moved up quite a bit. It's now, it basically has a lion's share in terms of, where it needs to be. It's the most popular scaling framework in 2022. It is twice as popular as any other framework, as you can see. Right? And very, very important point that I want to highlight is it basically gives you new ways of working. Now, a lot of people look at this big picture and are constantly intimidated. There is absolutely nothing to be intimidated by this big picture. We are going to take it one step at a time, very slowly, making sure we are imbibing and digesting the new ways of working throughout our Scaled Agile journey. Right? So there are 4 safe core values that I want to talk about, which are alignment, transparency, respect for people, and relentless improvement. And as you can see, all of these four core values are fundamental to DevOps as well. Being aligned, being transparent, continuously improving, and having respect for its people is fundamental part of DevOps as well. And safe core values very clearly, represents that. Apart from the core values, Scaled Agile also has the concept of lean agile mindset where we have basically imbibed both the lean thinking principles, which come from a manufacturing world, where we are focusing on very discrete work production, and you have the agile values on the right hand side, where we talk about what are the 4 core values through which we can deliver working software to customers faster, right? And Scaled Agile basically has the the 4 core values. It has the safe lean agile mindset that we are talking about, and apart from all of this, it also has these 10 principles that we've talked about earlier, right? We talked about the safe 10 principles: take an economic view, apply systems thinking, right? I'm sure most of you must have seen this. Assume variability, preserve options, build incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles, base your milestones on objective evaluation of working systems, make value flow without interruptions, apply cadence, synchronize with cross-domain planning, unlock the intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers, decentralize decision making, and organize around value. These safe principles are at the very foundation of everything that we do in Scaled Agile. Okay. And I also want to talk about the safe implementation roadmap for a couple of minutes before we wrap up, right? So this is a typical Scaled Agile implementation roadmap where we go over what's the process of implementing safe in any organization, right? So we always make sure that the leaders are trained first. So we start with the leaders, then we work along with who are our going to be the people who are going to be supporting us, our guiding coalition, the lean agile change agents and the trained executives and managers. Then we start working with how do you organize around value, how do you create an implementation plan. We start talking about preparing for an art launch. We then train the teams. We do a PA planning activity. That's one of the first steps we do. And then we coach the art execution by launching more arts and value streams. We accelerate and we continue doing this till Scaled Agile becomes part of our culture. Till all the practices that we've been following so far, they become part of our culture. Right? Now, Scaled Agile offers a lot of interesting courses for you to learn in this journey. Leading Safe is one of them. And as you can see, Safe for DevOps is also listed in one of those courses. And for those of you who are interested in how does it help me in my role or in my journey, this is a slide that I wanted to look at. As you can see, it's a role-based learning shape curve. So you can start off talking, if you're in the leadership or executive, start off with leading safe and lean portfolio management as a good starting step. If you're an architect or a system engineer, start off with leading safe architecture, safe for DevOps, agile software engineering, and so on. Right? And FYI, agile software engineering is probably going to be decommissioned very soon, but just letting you know. Right? Safe Scrum Master, safe for teams, advanced Scrum Master, release train engineer. As you can see, every single role has a very clear plan in terms of how we progress along in Scaled Agile at different levels. So you start off small, just learn leading safe, and start launching trains. We talk about other things, and you start launching solution trains. We talk about how are you going to help other teams grow. We talk about lean portfolio management, and so on. Right. Now, with that, I would like to kind of put my lecture to a pause, and I want to hear if you have any questions in general. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Let me know. Yes, DevOps really needs development knowledge. 100% correct. Hey, please use the chat window so it's easy for us to answer questions. If you post it in, not chat, I mean the Q&A window, please. The chat window makes it difficult for us to keep track of all the questions. So please use the Q&A window and we'll be able to happily answer all the questions that you may have as part of the class.
I guess everyone are able to access Q&A window.
Yeah, I think they are able to. Others, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Any questions or any suggestions? Or if you have any doubts, that also can be cleared now. So do you have anything else to tell Haricharan?
No, I think I'm good. I think yeah, I think I have covered whatever I wanted to cover as part of DevOps program. So I think we're good here.
All right. All right. So if you're not having any questions, then I think we are good to end the session.
Yeah, okay. I've done CSPO, which other certification I can take that's more like DevOps. If you are looking for something more like DevOps, then I would recommend you take Safe for DevOps. It's a pretty good course, especially if you're interested in DevOps. But given that you're doing CSPO, I would say probably go for POPM certification. If that is useful for you, I think that's a very good certification that you can probably take care of. You can do Safe POPM, or you can go after Safe for DevOps.
All right. So any more questions? All right. So you can get connected with Haricharan on LinkedIn also. So Haricharan, if you can give us your LinkedIn ID, they can
Sure.
get connected with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm just posting my LinkedIn URL in the chat window. Anybody who's interested, I'm more than happy to answer any other questions on Scaled Agile certifications as well if you need to. And this is my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to use it.
Great. Thank you, Haricharan.
Thank you.
So I think if we do not have any questions, we are good to end the session.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so
Okay.
much for joining the session. And thank you, Haricharan, for your time. So we are planning more sessions with Haricharan in the coming months. So please visit our KnowledgeHut website and get registered for the next sessions. And yes, thank you again. See you all in the next sessions. Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.